Kia ora, I'm Amanda Millar and welcome to Am and Courageous Conversations, a podcast that digs into the lives of those who are prepared to live courageously, no matter the cost. Sophie Brown, I cannot believe you're in the studio. We've been having this relationship via text, email, and I've so wanted to talk to you. It is such an honour to have you in this room in this podcast with me. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, I've been a bit impossible to get a hold of. But
Well, there's a lot that's been going on in your life. So, Sophie, for background for people, Sophie Brown, you have a big backstory already. You are 25, nearly 26.
Mm-hmm.
You are, when I think about gutsy young woman, you are a gutsy young woman. New Zealand didn't really know you until we heard that name, Mama Hooch. And now everyone, I'm damn sure everyone in this country knows that name and knows what it represents in terms of some of the most sinister, depraved, deviant and predatory sexual acts that were performed by two brothers, Danny and Roberto Jaz, from their restaurant, one of their restaurants, Mama Hooch. And you were one of their victims, one of Danny's victims at age 19. Wow. You've lived with this for 6 years. And you were very deliberate in choosing to have that suppression order lifted so you could speak up about the abuse and what happened to you. And this podcast is all about courageous people, and I want to know where that courage came from for you to make that big, big call.
A big question. Look, there was a few reasons why I did it, and we touched on just earlier today that I did have a few years to, I guess, think about it. And I have a friend, Katie Harris, who's a journalist, and we talked about it for quite a few years because she'd been aware of what happened to me and was part of my support system moving through that. And I guess somewhere in that 6 years, she asked me if I would ever want to tell my story. And we talked a bit through the different options that I could lift my name suppression and have everyone know who I am, or I could talk and not have my name attached to it and just be anonymous. And we'd go back and forth on this conversation. We didn't really make any decisions until maybe a few months before court. And part of the reason why I decided to just go the whole way, lift my name suppression and everything was it's really taking back control of my story, sharing it how I want. You know, you hear all the time in the media of predominantly women being assaulted, court cases, different people going to jail for heinous acts that they commit on different people. You rarely hear from the victim or the survivor or the person on the other end. So making that real and tangible for people was, I think, a big thing for me as well.
That is huge, though, because it's not like, it is so much etched into your life, the pain and all that you've gone through, and I want to go through some of that with you as well. But it's suddenly like the names Danny and Roberto Jaz, your name is now synonymous with this hideous case. Is that something that you really thought through and recognised how much it was going to impact on you?
Yeah, Katie and I talked about it a lot. Obviously, being in the media space, she could understand what that meant. She'd sort of had conversations with the legal team as well. And I also have a counsellor that I finally went to therapy. You'd think that I would have gone almost straight away, but I didn't. I went, I think it was about May, June last year, finally, and found a therapist that I really, really clicked with. And from there, we unpacked what that really meant with lifting my name suppression and, you know, it being available for anybody to search.
Well, that's right. Exactly. You were kind of public property in a way, aren't you?
It's weird because I still don't see it as a really big thing. And maybe that's just my mind protecting me, and one day it'll just suddenly hit me and I'll be like, oh my gosh, what have I done? But yeah, look, at the end of the day, the reality is that the assault and things is happening in our communities every day, and people aren't talking about it. So I sort of nominated myself as tribute to be talking about it based on my experience.
Well, that is awesome. That is amazing that you're doing this for other women and to help really bring a lot more of this awareness to the surface. And for me, I have a bit of a kind of a personal stake in this and professional stake, because to me, this whole case and what you've done is kind of like revisiting history for me. It was 25 years ago that I did an investigation into a doctor in Christchurch. And what is it about Christchurch? Something weird going on. But in Christchurch, this was a man whose name was Dr. Morgan Fahey. And he had been sexually assaulting, violating and raping his patients for many years. And most of those women did not know that there were other women. So first of all, the woman came to me, and this was in 1998, and said, we want to talk about this, because he was running for mayor. At this stage, he was deputy mayor. And they said he cannot be allowed. This cannot continue. It must come to the surface. And they'd gone to the police, but no one had listened. And, well, they felt no one had listened. And so we put these women on air, but they were basically in silhouette or disguise, because they were so fearful of the response from people who clearly loved and admired this mayor. Cutting a long story short, what changed things was we put that story to air, and one woman, like the Sophie Brown back then, her name was Brenda Wright, she came to me and said, I know what happened to those women is true. He is lying. This is real. And I know, because it happened to me. I was 8 months pregnant, an unmarried mother, as we used to say in those days. And he was my doctor who was going to deliver my baby, and he raped her. And she said, I want to confront him. I want to wear a camera so that I can hold up a picture and say, do you remember this young woman, Dr. Fahey? Because this is the woman you raped when I was 18.
I've got chills.
Yeah, it was chilling. And in fact, I have too. Little goosies running up and down me right now, going back to that day. And it was so bizarre. I know this is not a podcast about my history, but what was so different then was there was no social media. And we had recorded this interview that she'd conducted on her own with this little pencil cam in her lapel in her jacket, with this great big thumping suitcase that had this old archaic, which is really revolutionary, camera in there. And we were stuck around the road in a car going, where is she? She's been in there for 35 minutes, and we couldn't see what was going on. And out she came with a story. And as a result of her courage, as a result of her being prepared to eyeball her attacker, her rapist, she was what clinched the case that allowed it to go to court, and that ultimately led to Dr. Morgan Fahey being jailed for 7 years or 6 years, I think. So, yeah, it's like history's repeating itself. They tried to support those women, tried to go to the police. You were one that went to the police. Other woman went to the police, and yet it took so long. How do you feel that this is what is perpetuated, that there's this whole great big gap where police, society, everybody just doesn't see it, doesn't recognise it, doesn't act on it?
That's a very big question. One thing I did on Brenda's, was Brenda?
Brenda.
On Brenda's story, like, how amazing for her to take the power and take the control into her own hands and say, this isn't being dealt with. I'm going to stand in a room with that man and get what I need, which is just amazing. I guess for me, like if I think about my story, you know, the police was already charging them when I had to, the next time I confronted my abuser was back in a couple of months ago in court when I did my witness impact statement. I thankfully hadn't seen them since October 17th, 2017.
But at any stage, you could have seen them.
I
You
could
know,
have, and
you
some
were
of the
in
girls did.
Christchurch, and that is just chilling that you were in that position where at any stage they could walk around the corner and there they would be.
Some of the girls did. Some of the girls saw, I think one girl, I heard that she saw Roberto when she was out in town one night at a bar, which imagine just turning around and he's there. I can't imagine. But to your question before, I've been thinking a lot about this because with news obviously coming out that, you know, Danny and Roberto have spent nearly $1 million of taxpayer money. If you look at the disparity between that and what's offered to victim and survivors in courts, you know, it's a very isolated, disjointed system. They didn't have systems in place to deal with multiple survivors, or as we were witnesses because the Crown was charging the men. They didn't have systems in place to be doing all this. So when Helen Mahoon-Stroud, who was the detective and our main correspondent, she was sending all this info and she's like, right, I need these girls flown from these places with these support people. I need accommodation on these dates. And, you know, obviously with court, it all changes. I mean, you would have spent years in court, so you'll understand that things change literally in the moment. So organizing that with the Ministry of Justice and then different charities that were also supporting, it was just broken. And I mean, the level of support that's offered, we're offered services and things like that. But when you look at how much the men were able to spend trying to stay out of jail, and that, I mean, a very small percentage, but a small percentage is ours as their survivors of their assaults. That's our money.
Well, absolutely. And for instance, you're counselling right now. Who's paying for that?
Me.
And will the Ministry of Justice reimburse you? Is
No.
there any capacity to do that? That is appalling.
They offer services, but obviously you have to go to their services, whereas anyone who's gone through counselling or looked into counselling knows it is very hard to find somebody that you wholeheartedly trust, that you can actually do the work that you're looking to do in counselling. You can't just go to one person and they're all the same. It's not a cookie cutter operation there. You've got to find somebody that you really click with. And sometimes those people are outside of the services that they offer. And that's just the reality. And the men didn't even have to pay reparations. I mean, yeah, they have to serve years on their sentence, but
which they're still denying and appealing. Yeah.
Exactly. But, you know, I heard stories from other women that moved out of Christchurch because of the fear of running into those men. So they had to uproot, fund everything themselves and go and find somewhere else to settle down. And you go, yeah, sure, there's money, but, you know, what about your support networks that you're uprooting and lifting somewhere else? What about making new friends, finding new jobs, all the time in a new place, familiarizing yourself, calling a new place home? Like, there is so much rooted in that. And the fact that I think it's so important to acknowledge those kind of things. And some women did in their victim impact statements. It was very powerful.
Wow. You know, I guess for looking at this and for instance, going through all the victim impact, or some of them, it was like victim 1, victim 2, victim complaint, you know, all your stories, it was extraordinary. So when you got up and spoke, and that was an exceptionally powerful victim impact report or statement that you gave, I had tears in my eyes at the end of it. It was just like, oh my gosh, I felt, and again, I'm getting shivers just thinking about what you said. But you were not only speaking about your situation there, you were speaking on behalf of the women. So you've made a commitment, haven't you, in a way, not that you probably intended to, but you've made a commitment now in a way to be a voice for other women.
Yeah, and it was one thing when I was going through, I guess, the process of deciding to lift my name suppression. One of the things that did strike me I thought I was just going to do the podcast, but obviously there's been more things that I've been inspired to do. And one thing that I really didn't want to be a negative impact was other women in the case, sort of, I guess, it bringing everything back for them, and it just sort of being a bit more traumatic than I would hope it to be. But when we were all, so there was 8 of us, I think, that did our victim impact statements, and we all went for a drink after, which was absolutely lovely. And we've got each other on social media and everything now, which is so nice. So this weird sisterhood that we formed, and a lot of them were saying that they were just so proud and so happy that I had decided to lift my name suppression, because they felt the same way that I did, that our side of the story needed to be told to the public, not just these men are going away for this many crimes for this many years, and making it real and sharing what has been our lives for 6 years and helping other people understand what that really means for somebody to be on that side of something like this.
Wow, yeah. And look, I just want to highlight one of the sections or a quote that you gave in that court. You were standing there with cameras right in your face while you delivered that gut-wrenching statement to the judge and to your abusers, especially Danny Jaz. You said, and I'll never forget this, you were eyeballing him when you said, "You stole my fierce independence from me. You stole my right to feel safe in my own mind from me, and you stole my right to autonomy over my own body." You stole my right to autonomy over my own body away. So that was 3 incredibly powerful things that would have just been such a moment for you, because it sure as hell felt like a moment to me. What was it like looking at him in court? What was going through your head? Can you describe that?
I don't actually know if I can.
Can't you?
It was like to be up there, and because as I said, that was the first time that I have seen him, because when you're testifying in court, they put screens up so you don't have to. He can still see you through cameras, but you don't have visuals on him, which is great because you can obviously just focus on delivering your testimony and the lawyers that are cross-examining you harshly. But yeah, standing up and facing him, my victim impact statement, one night I had an epiphany because we had to submit a draft to the courts. And I wrote that all at 2 a.m. And the only part that I added was the last paragraph, and it was the night before I was going to say it. Everything else, I left it as is. And so what I'd written was truly from the heart. So my mission was to deliver something that he was going to have to sit in jail replaying over and over in his head, like he's done to me with the night of October 17th, 2017. I wanted to deliver something that was really just going to hopefully hit home for him. Although in saying that, I truly think those men are sociopathic narcissists, and I really don't think they have the capacity to understand what they've done to us. They probably would have just listened to what I said and gone, you know what, that's fine. That's your take on the situation, not mine. I hope not. And the judge said it as well, actually. And he was a very good judge. And when he was sentencing, he said, I hope you now understand the severity of the pain and the trauma that you've caused on these women, and you now get to sit and think about that.
It's extraordinary. And so for me, understanding a little bit more about your case, I didn't realise it wasn't until quite a lot down the track that you discovered that you had been drugged.
Yeah.
You didn't realise that? You went through that process where you obviously came to the conclusion that you'd been sexually violated, but you didn't know about the drugs.
No. So what the police and the courts had to do was, in order for us women to provide a testimony that is from our memory, we couldn't obviously be flooded with new information. So we had, they they chopped a chunk of hair, like probably like this size, out of our hair and did the drug tests back in, would have been maybe 2018, 2019.
Wow, that long after the event.
Yeah. So initially when I reported it wasn't going to go to court because I was one of the, I was one of the first to make a formal report to the police and want something done about it.
And this was the day after
This was the day after,
violated.
in 2017. And it wasn't until, I'm not sure of the dates, it was somewhere, it was maybe a year and a half later, so it's not really that important, where the police called me and they go, we actually have enough evidence to take this to court. So for that year and a half, approximately, it wasn't going to go anywhere. And then, the police called. I told my siblings what had happened because I knew it was going to be in the media. I didn't quite understand at the time that, like, obviously that didn't mean that it was going to be out there for me, but it felt like the right time to let them know that this had happened to me and I'm going to be going through this process, and give them time, I guess, to sort of, for it to sit with them.
Big thing for them to take on board as well.
Yeah. So at that time, they did the drug tests. And then, I didn't find out the results until after I'd testified in court, which was February this year.
Oh, my God. So that wasn't, you never knew
No.
the
I
outcome.
wasn't allowed to know.
No.
Because I couldn't have it affect my...
Impacting your story and your evidence.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Just sheesh, science. And so for there's a lot of life that you were left to get on with in that intervening time from that hideous night until the court case. So what happened to you? What was the cost of this hideous sexual violation on you in that night?
There's a lot of costs, and I don't think I've fully worked through all of those. I guess in the very short term, it was just not being really aligned with myself, having traumatic memories in your head. Most of the time you can forget them, but they're still there, but they're not playing in your head. And then just at a sudden moment, it'll just hit you. And it's, like we talk a lot about people having triggers and things like that. And I do think that the term is being overplayed and overused these days, but the reality of it is that these come out of nowhere in your everyday life. The next week when I was going through, I guess, my photo memories, I was at a university day festival thing the following week after it had happened to me. So I just completely just went, I'm not going to deal with that. And there's so many, I guess, underlying costs that come with that. You're not truly developing into who you want to be. You spend nights where you don't want to go out, you don't want to see anyone, but then you don't want to be alone. And there's just so much time you spend in and outside of your head that I don't think you can ever quantify.
And how are you working through that when obviously it was quite an isolating experience? You did tell people, but then I guess that wasn't always going to work out well either.
No, I had a very interesting, and I've always had problems leaning on people. I've never had, or now I do, but my support structure has never been sturdy. Like, it's always, there's times and points in time where it's sturdy, and then obviously someone leaves or someone goes and it's not their fault, but that's life. But I myself wasn't my own strong support structure. So when that wobbled, it wasn't great. And when that first happened, there was a few people that I told that went and told other people. And like, I was at university at the time, so, word spreads fast. And I had other girls coming up to me at university going, oh my gosh, I heard this happened to you. I'm so sorry. And they had the best intentions, obviously. But what they didn't realize is that was just making me not want to tell other people, because I didn't want people knowing that I didn't choose to tell. That's a very sensitive piece of information to be spreading. So yeah, my experience with leaning on people for it was very fragmented. So I sort of stopped doing it. there was a few people that I had that were awesome support people for me, but naturally people have their own lives, right? Things happen, life happens. This isn't something, for me, it's like one of the biggest things that's happened in my life. But for people near me, they have been good friends, and I wouldn't call them bad friends for doing so, but they've got their own big things that are happening in their lives. It's very hard to be keeping tabs on all the different people and all the different things that they're going through.
So what as well, and amongst that, as a young student, you were also, what were your relationships like? How did it impact on, your potentially partners, people that you were meeting?
I didn't really have them. I didn't really have relationships up until 2021. I didn't have a serious relationship. I had, I guess, flings, or as they call them these days, situationships with
I got to get hip.
with people.
Situationships. That's cool.
Which is where, you're not together, but you are seeing each other, or you're sleeping with each other, or, but you wouldn't call them your boyfriend or your girlfriend. I think there's so much to be unpacked there. And I had succumbed to it as well, but I guess this is just overall societal fear of commitment. But mine was so much deeper, obviously. So I would just find somebody and I guess attach myself to the smallest of crumbs that they'd offer and think that was romance and that was what I could expect from a relationship. And then there would be that lack of commitment, and then something would happen and I'd be upset, but then I'd still stay because I didn't like letting go of things. And I guess it warped my sense of self and my sense of confidence in my self-worth.
Of course it would. I mean, all of that is because what you were living with this event, and you still didn't know that there were two these brothers that were going to come before court. You were thinking a lot of it was your fault. Was that ever part of what was going through your head?
I've spoken in the past about, women inherently blame ourselves for things that happen. And we've been taught to in society, well, maybe if you didn't wear that, if you didn't dress like that, if you didn't act like that, if you didn't have that other drink. And, I've heard it from so many people, when I tell the story and be like, oh, what, were you really drunk? Why does it matter? That doesn't matter. Like,
it's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant, exactly. But we've heard this time and time again in so many different forms in our media, just in society. And so this creates this shame that when something does happen, you go, oh, but I put myself in that position. I should be ashamed of how I acted. None of the fault is ours, but you can't help but go there. And so one of the things that I think a lot about is how do we shift this shame that women feel, or that victims and survivors feel, to shift it back onto the predators and the people that do onto people as they so wish, which is so wrong.
Well, the more people who speak up like you have, then hopefully we're moving towards that. But is that part of a sense of deep frustration and potentially bitterness that all of this has gone on and nothing's changed really? This is the 21st century. We're almost in 2024 and we are still dealing with this shit.
Well, and that's what's insane. When we had the phone conversation a few weeks ago to look at, very different cases, but between Morgan Fahey and the Jaz brothers, the fact that they had the ability to offend for so long from positions of power as well, and be getting away with it and be confident that they were getting away with it is just crazy. When was Morgan Fahey?
That was 1998, and then
That was when I was born.
Oh my! Well, there you go. Yeah, that was a long time ago. But one would think, with Me Too and everything else that's gone on in this world, a whole level of awareness, that we would be being a whole lot more proactive and really addressing this level of abuse in our society, especially in New Zealand, where we have shocking sexual assault rates.
And look, part of why I came forward was because, we've had these movements. Nothing's changed. I have a 17-year-old sister, and I still hear from her friends that are being assaulted at parties, that, schools are having to have talks with their students about consent. So, like, people can say, oh, it's whatever, it's Me Too movement. But the fact is that predominantly women are still at a very high risk of being assaulted. And that's just the reality. And I'm sorry, but that's not a world I want to live in. And that's not a world that I want my sister to grow up in. That's not a world I want my future kids to grow up in. So let's start talking about how to make it better.
And how do you think, because this is something that you're talking about, how do you think personally you will continue to make it better? What's the prime goal that you have right now? I mean, it's hard. You're 25, for goodness sake. You've already done something awesome and amazing, courageous. What else is in your line of sights?
So obviously time is of the essence, and having a job, but looking to do this work, it's sort of when I have time. What I'm looking into...
When you say this work, you mean actually advocating on behalf of women?
Yeah. So when I've sort of unpacked what that looks like, I've sort of reframed it as being a sexual assault impact advocate. And so what that means, framed it up.
Sexual assault impact
advocate.
Go Sophie Brown. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so what that means, and look, this is all still to be continued, is looking at it in a few different ways. So one is the prevention, so the education. So how do we educate, younger people, but do you know what? The mindset needs to shift of older people that have grown up in a generation where things like this were just swept under the rug. How do we educate people to understand, one, what consent is, how to support people if they do have friends and people near them that say, I've been assaulted, and, how do we put structures around that? As well as that, I guess also looking at why aren't people reporting? Data shows that about 30% of people would actually report a sexual assault to the police. The reality of that is, how do you get the data for that? It's an estimate, right? It's probably lower. So what are the bridges, and how do we close that gap for people actually reporting, and making authorities aware of when this happens? So a lot of it right now is research, obviously looking into my experience as well. The other side of that too is helping police and helping our authorities work to make the system better. Helen and I have had conversations on...
This is the detective.
Yeah. So we have conversations, and I still need to get back to her. She is all ears for everything. She's like, write it down. And we did a feedback interview. So that was, she submitted that then to the police. And I really like that because, she's very aware that we're not going to get it perfect on the police side, but how can we do it better? And the best way to do that is to get feedback from people that have been in the situation.
Wow, that's fascinating to know that there is that level of interest and follow-up and feedback that's been happening. Because to be honest, Sophie, you've been through the process. Would you advocate to a woman that you met to put themselves through the whole thing, the 6 years that you've endured?
This has actually happened. So one of the I'm going to say it's a positive because I really think it is in coming out and having my name, women have reached out to me, and I've had some that just wanted to share their story. They just wanted to talk to someone that has been in the situation, about the emotions and the challenges that they've faced, and, you know, a problem shared is a problem halved. I had one woman reach out and we connected and we still talk quite regularly. And she was currently working through the process of reporting a historical sexual assault case to police in Hamilton. And what the police had told her was that if she reported, they would have to notify him. This isn't true. And I know this isn't true. And so I put her in touch with Helen, who gave her a call and actually talked to her. But like, and this isn't just to out the police, but, you know, she called and so one of the forms.
It's horrifying.
One of the ways that you can report a case is you can call the police and they will come to you. They sent 2 male police officers to her house where she lives alone. Where's the thought behind that? So it's all these little things that need work and need adjustment to be thinking about the perspective of the victim and of the survivor, who is in, you know, for years, if they've been dealing with this for years, is in a powerless mindset. They don't feel that they have the control. You know, they have had something taken away from them. How do we have it ingrained in our system whereby that person feels that they're in a position of empowerment and they feel powerful and, you know, ensure that they feel that they're in control of what happens? This isn't what happened in this case. And this woman felt that this was being taken away from her and that she was going to lose control of the situation completely, which is so unfair and also not how the system operates. So there's a massive education gap for our everyday officers as well. And it's not their fault. I mean, they're learning so many different things at police academies and things like that. I get it, but let's do something to make it better.
Wow, you'll be probably getting the call soon, coming out to police college. Sophie Brown, we need you. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So you were able to connect. This is the end of the story. You were able to connect this woman in Hamilton with Helen. And as a result.
So so back to your question of would I advocate and recommend it? So it depends. It depends. A lot of the reason why women will report is not actually to go through with with case and with court. Court is a grueling process, but there's no 2 ways about it. If you're committing to taking someone to court, you're committing to having, years of being questioned, getting your stories straight, revisiting those traumatic events. And the day in court itself being cross-examined by lawyers that are trying to prove that, maybe, I don't know, some of the questions that I got asked is maybe you just had too much to drink, all those kind of things.
Reinforcing all those stereotypes, all of that stuff that's putting all the shame and pointing the finger at you.
Exactly. And so to go through that process, a lot of women don't want to. A lot of people don't want to. And 100% that is understandable. But for a lot of people to report it to an authoritative figure and say, this happened to me by this person. Currently, I don't want anything to be done about it, but it's part of the healing process to have that reported. It's, a weight off your chest. It's that somebody knows. And as we've proven in this case, we've set a precedent that you can send people to jail based on circumstantial evidence from lots of different people. In my head, I go, well, how do we get more people to report? Not necessarily that they alone want to take people to court, but I look at, so many different cases, Dilworth case, everything like that, where there are so many people involved. Imagine if we could identify other people in our communities that have done this to multiple people and actually put them where they belong, which is in jail.
From here, do you think about, especially Danny Jaz, since he was your abuser, how often do you think about him and his brother?
Not a lot. I've done a lot of work to go, and when I've thought a lot about the past 6 years for me, I'd sort of built this, I guess, framework of how I've processed what I've been through and I guess the emotional states that I've been through. And it all basically is rooted in going from powerless to powerful. I've said those words a few times. And what that means is going from a position where Danny has power over me and, his actions have power over me, to choosing to not allow that anymore in my head, and choosing to be in my own power, and choosing, and, I choose what I think about now. I choose how I frame this in my mind. I choose where I place the shame, which is with him and not me. And I've done a lot of work to get to that position. Yeah, it's not linear. Sometimes, you ebb and flow in and out of it, but most of the time I'm able to go, this is the situation that happened to me, but I don't give him any power in my mind anymore. So a lot of that means that I don't think about him.
And again, I love that moment in your victim impact statement where you told him he was worthless.
Yeah. There was actually something that was taken out of my victim impact statement that...
was it a swear, a word that began with F, or no? Was it?
No, it was, so after I said, because you are worthless, I can't remember how it was quite written, but basically in your victim impact statement, you can't say anything that hints at how long you think they should be sentenced for. And so I said somewhere along the lines of, you're worthless and you deserve to be in jail for a very long time. And so that part, or maybe I replaced that with worthless or something like that, but I had to reframe something around there, which is very interesting, because you think that when you're in that sort of situation, like,
that's not going to influence. Mind, exactly. After all that you've been through, and the courage and the sense of import of what you're doing, you would think that judges would be beyond that. That's not relevant. Fascinating.
But that's our legal system.
So, coming to the end of our discussion, Sophie, what's given you, out of this whole huge chunk of 6 years of your life, what has given you, if there is a place of companionship or comfort, what's got you through?
I do have a very good support system now. I think a lot of it, honestly, myself. I rejected the idea that I was going to let this take control of my life. And I guess it's in the same strain of telling my story, in that I want to be in control of my life. I wanted to choose where I go in life. And yeah, of course, having this happen does throw a massive spanner in the works. But in a weird way, I think it almost gave me fuel to say, like, no one else is going to be in control of where I go and what I do in life. I'm going to be.
Awesome. That's amazing. So for other women out there now, there's a little word, we call it the coach session part of this podcast. What would be your tips or the advice that you'd give to women or to anybody out there in terms of sexual assaults or being put in that situation? Is there anything that you could give?
For people that have been victimized or are survivors of sexual assault, I didn't take this advice up until last year. Find a counselor. Find one that you really gel with, that will listen, that works with you in the way that you want to work through these different events. And that might not be an instantaneous thing. You have to be ready to be unpacking these, but even just finding a counselor to start talking about your day, talking about your friendship issues, talking about your relationship issues. You don't even have to get to the traumatic events straight away. Find someone that you can get comfortable with, and be very precious. I think I said this in my podcast with Katie. Be very precious about who you let into your safe circle, because it's a privilege. Like, everyone should understand, it's a privilege for people to know them. and to be in their life and to be in their inner circle and to know the deepest, darkest things about them. So make sure that, you know, you're vetting that support system all the time and keep it small. You know, you can find good people in this world, and it does take time. Look, it's not without its own efforts, but finding that structure of people that you've got to lean on and will be there for you through thick and thin is super important. And it's something that I didn't quite understand for many years. I sort of just had a lot of friends, but you know, when I thought about it, they were party friends, or they were people that I wouldn't call in the darkest of times, and I was telling them things about me that is very, very deep. So doing that and being gentle and staying curious as well.
Man, wise beyond your years. I mean, they are kind of tips that, from my perspective, that I would be sharing now because of all the life that's lived. But for a 25-year-old to be that cognizant of what is critical is pretty...
Fit a lot of life in 25 years.
Shush, yeah, you have. Finally, is there one quote or mantra or something that you've really taken on board that's helped you through some of these tough times? Is there anything that you constantly tell yourself?
There's a few, but one that I sort of always come back to, and I think it will repeat in my head without me thinking about it, is that life's tough, but so are you. And it's so cliche. You know, you see people with the like stickers up on their walls and things, but it's a great reminder that, you know, sometimes life is hard, and everybody's life is hard in all different ways. You know, even getting a reminder today, me and my sister were walking down the street and she goes, that moment when you realize that everybody's got a complicated life just like yours. Like everyone's battling their own demons, and that little reminder that you are also tough and, you know, you can take control and you can choose to work through things, I think is really, really important. And it's something that has been really good for me to intentionally think about when life gets hard, because it gets hard all the time.
When life gets hard, you get hard, you get tough. Sophie Brown, you are testament to that. You are one very staunch and incredibly inspiring young woman. I can't wait to see what you do and how you're going to take this and run with it. You already are. It's an enormous thing you're doing, and you've got a gift that you're now sharing. You've taken something very negative and you've turned it into a positive, and that is just incredibly courageous.
Hopefully
awesome work.
It's just the start.
Well, no, it's amazing. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate you being so honest and sharing what has been really, really difficult. We are in awe. So thank you so much, Sophie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you.